Hello, this is Story Time, and I'm your storyteller, Ron Miscavige. I have a very interesting story to tell you today, and I just want to get into a little bit of business and get it out of the way to begin with, and that is this. If you haven't subscribed to this, could you please do so now and press the bell so that whenever we have a new story time, you'll get notified, or even other videos that I do on my website. And also, if you care to donate to this, you can become a patron, or you can do a one-time donation through PayPal. How to do it is described in the description of this video. So, with that out of the way, let me start. And to start with, I want to tell you this because, look, we're all living life. If you're listening to this, you're alive, and you do things that you do all the time, such as you go to sleep, you wake up, you go to work, you pay taxes, you do the regular things, and I call these things a bit mundane. When things happen like I'm going to tell you about, this gives spice to life, and it really is great to have this to happen to you once in a while. This happened to me. This isn't something that I caused. So as I look back even now, I smile thinking about what happened that time back in the 50s. And so having said that, let me get started on today's story. I'm going to take you back to about 1955. I was in the Marine Corps at the time, and I was in the Marine Band in Quantico, Virginia. How I got in that band, I covered in a prior video that I did. Basically, I won a contest playing my trumpet, won some money. I needed the money to go to Philadelphia to see my girlfriend. Came back, and I was ordered to go into the band. Stroke of luck. I've always enjoyed music. And this, to me, was great because the Korean War was over. There was no sense going there except to be an occupational troop. So I wasn't ordered to go there. I stayed in Quantico, Virginia, in the band. And one of the things that I did in the band, or the band did, was go to different cities that requested our presence. We would go there to play for various functions or some dedication or whatever. One of these times we were ordered, well, not ordered, we were requested to go to Newark, New Jersey to play for some UN speakers that was going to speak at a big theater there in Newark. So, this is the 50s, and the airplane that took us there was not like a commercial jet. Quantico had its own air station, so we flew up in a propeller plane that didn't have seats sitting like this. You sat in web seats right along the both sides of the airplane. One of the things we all had to do is we wore parachute harnesses hooked up in them, and we had a parachute that was stored up in a compartment above us. We had to take it down, hook it up to the parachute harness to make sure we knew how to do that, unhook it, put it back up. And then before we took off, everybody had to stand up and put their hand on a parachute so that the pilot could see everybody has a parachute. Wild, but that's what we had to do. So now we sit down, and our mess hall provided each of us with a box lunch. And we had 2 sandwiches, an apple, and a piece of cake. And as I recall, why I recall this, I don't know, but I think it was roast beef sandwiches. So now, we're sitting there, ready to take off. One of the guys in the band's name was Walter Jolly, who was a great big band drummer. I mean, he just could drive a band and just sound like Gene Krupa. But Walter Jolly was scared out of his mind to fly. And I remember looking across at him, and his eyes were bug-eyed, and they were looking up front like this. And so we're at the end of the runway, and you could hear the propellers winding up, and they have the brakes on, and it's almost vibrating. And Walter's looking at it. When they released those brakes and it started going up, by the time we were airborne, Walter Jolly ate both sandwiches, the apple, and a piece of cake. That was his way to handle flying. But anyway, just an interesting side note. So we fly there, and we get off the plane in Newark, New Jersey, and there's photographers waiting for us from the local newspaper. We have to pose next to the airplane. They took our picture, and within hours, that was on the front page of the big newspaper there in Newark, New Jersey. I mean, one hell of a welcome, so fine. And while we were there, we were met by a representative from the Ballantine Brewery. And he said, "Gentlemen, you're all welcome to come to our brewery. We have lunch waiting for you, and you can tour our brewery in the afternoon." So we thought, this is great, man. So they drove us in buses to the brewery, and there's this great lunch waiting for us. Wow, this is really a hell of a trip, And then we started touring the brewery. And by the way, while we were there, we could drink as much beer as we wanted to. And as a matter of fact, that's what everybody did. They drank as much beer as they could tolerate. So now, we're drinking for about 3 hours. We then end up going to the theater where we're going to play for these UN delegates who are going to speak. And on the marquee, you could see it had UN speakers in small print and then U.S. Marine Band, so you could see what people were looking forward to. So we go in the theater, and we set up on the stage, and our band officer, Vic Schull, Warrant Officer Vic Schull, who's a hell of a Marine and a hell of a guy. I mean, he was a guy that if you wanted to have a role model, this was the guy you could model your life after. A little side story on Vic. Let me just tell you about him a bit. When I was in Quantico in the band, we lived in barracks, and our rehearsal room for the band was on the 3rd floor. These buildings had 10-foot ceilings. It wasn't like a house where you have an 8-foot ceiling. And one time we had a rehearsal piano delivered right at the doorway to the barracks to be taken upstairs to the 3rd floor. A rehearsalist piano is a shorter piano. It's not like a full size or a baby grand, but nevertheless, it's heavy, really heavy. So they bring it in the door, and Vic Schull stands in the back part of it, reaches down, put his hands on the grips of the piano, and he had 2 of the band members on each side to balance it. So as he's walking up the steps, they would keep it from falling backwards. And he walked it up on his back, holding onto the 2 handles, 3 stories to the rehearsal room. This guy's strong, okay? As a matter of fact, there's another story. I just want to relate this to you because it's the type of guy that he was. He would defend his troops. He was in Japan, and there was a base there where they had a small band, and Vic was in charge of the band there. One day, one of the members of the band came in looking beat up. You could see that he had these knuckle bumps. He had a black eye and everything. And Vic says, "Oh, wait a minute, what the hell happened to you?" And he says, "Sir, I got in a fight." And he says, "Well, who was the guy?" And he told him he was a guy in the Air Force. He said, "Get in the car." Guy got in the car. Vic drove to the Air Force Base, went to the Provost Marshal, and asked where this guy was located. He had the guy's name. Went to the barracks where he was. Vic walks in the barracks, and he says, "Okay, he's here. Can you point him out to me?" The guy looked around, and says, "That's him over there." So Vic walked over to the guy, and he said, "Is this the guy?" And he says, "Yes, sir." 1 shot to the head, knocked him out. Guy went to the ground. Vic says, "Let's go." They walked out. Didn't say another word, and nobody said anything to him in the barracks. That's the type of guy he was. And he was not a big guy. He was about my height and weight in those days, which, getting older, I'm not as tall as I used to be. That happens as you get older. He was about 5'6", 5'7", but strong as an ox, transparent as anything. What you see is what you got. He was tough, but he was fair. So that's Vic, and I say that because now the band is set up in this theater, as I said a little earlier, and Vic is leaning on a podium. He had been drinking with us all day too. So he's saying, they probably want more money. He's making comments on the UN speakers, which, as I look back, that wasn't the politically correct thing to do. But if anything, Vic was not politically correct. We played the gig. We sounded great to ourselves. Who knows how we sounded? I mean, to a person, I would say the whole band was hammered. Okay. Now, the next day we went back. What's the lesson to be learned here? Because I do want to get a lesson out of this. My story time is turning into a bit of a life lesson, a combination thing. So let's see, what is the lesson to be learned? I'll tell you what it is. Do things in the proper sequence. I'll give you an example. You wouldn't wake up in the morning, put on your trousers, and then put your underwear on over the trousers. That's so obvious, I don't even have to mention it. But that's what I mean by correct sequence. You'd put your underclothing on, and then you'd put your outer clothing on. What is the lesson here? Now listen carefully, because this is an important lesson to be learned. If by some stroke of luck, and maybe some musical talent that you had, you got into a military service band, and you were requested to go to another city to play for some function where maybe you had UN speakers speaking, and then tour a brewery and play a concert. The lesson is this: don't tour the brewery until after the gig. Okay, I could hardly get it out without laughing, but let me tell you something. Stuff like this happening is the spice of life. You wake up and do the ordinary things every day. Things like this is like having maybe some nice red peppers or salt and peppers put on your food to give it that extra little spice and tasty. That was the story I wanted to relate to you today. It's humorous now. I don't know how people took it in those days. I think we were forgiven because we had a good band, and we probably did do a nice concert. But that's today's life lesson. Do things in the proper sequence. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope I gave you a little bit of a laugh. These days, I think it's nice to have a little break from what's going on in our society. So to end off, I just would like to wish all of you a healthy, successful, happy life. God bless all of you, and may God bless America. I will see you on the next story time. Goodbye for now.